All right, so Crafton's budget workshop for November 9th is starting right now. Let me share the PowerPoint that we have prepared. Great. So this is to review the section that we reviewed last time, but in more detail, so that you'll be able to see some of the things that were not clear on the last time we did this. So I just want to inform people of some reminders and some updates that we had to the draft budget. I provided all the council members with a printed version of the entire draft budget, including all four funds: the general fund, the sewer fund, the road fund, and the capital bond fund. And I'll provide those updates in a second. I just wanted to reaffirm that for this budget process, we do have a balanced budget with no tax increase. And we plan to advertise this the weekend after Thanksgiving for adoption at the December 14th meeting. It'll actually be printed in the paper on the Thursday of the next meeting. So it'll be printed in the paper on the November. The notice will be printed in the paper on the at the November 30th meeting. A few changes that had to be made to the draft budget based on new information that we received after the original one was done. First off, our insurance dividend was $30,000 lower than it was in the previous year. And so I adjusted the budget to assume for that. So we reduced that budget by $20,000. And we had two expenses that changed. One, the community and economic development position that Doug Sample had been in and now has left. So we have reduced that budget by $23,000 to accommodate for the fact that he was probably overpaid in that position. And then the pension fund cost increased by $30,000 this year for the non-uniform pension fund. And so we increased that budget by $30,000 in the spreadsheet. And then I went through and was able to tweak some of the smaller things to accommodate for that, so that we didn't have to eliminate any of the things that we had already approved in previous conversations. So without taking any more money from any of the reserve funds, we just tweaked a few of the budgets, reviewed where they were at further in the year. So I was able to make small changes on several places to accommodate that $30,000. So with that, I'm going to go back to the bond fund that we started talking about at the last meeting, but I left everyone with a little less information than they needed. So I'm actually, just to review this, these are the ongoing projects that are happening right now and the budgets associated with them. We have preliminarily budgeted $640,000 for the public works building, but the engineering committee is reviewing that, and the engineer and I are working closely with Gateway to figure out what that will actually be moving into the new year, because there are several changes that needs to happen. We initially budgeted the stairs for $700,000 to give us some wiggle room, but most likely we will be trying to keep that around $500,000. But this will allow us to have some wiggle room in the bond fund. The pool, and just to give you an example, the pool bathhouse has already gone up by about $50,000. So this is actually needs to be adjusted to be $650,000 for the pool bathhouse, because we've already approved, or we will be ratifying tonight a couple change orders for the pool bathhouse. We've budgeted $455,000 for Linwood and Noble Park, $4 million for Broadhead project we talked about several times, and then $150,000 for the Station Street wall. Now, these are all for construction costs. There's additional engineering costs on the other side, but I won't go into that. Before I do that, I'll refer to the bond fund so you can understand all of the different moving parts as it relates to. I need to share my screen.
Yeah, so you probably want to share the screen once
I will do that. Yep.
So just to clarify, Jim,
yes,
that is not the money coming out of the bond. That is a combination of grant money and money coming out of the bond.
Correct. Yeah. And that you'll see that more now when we show this part. And I'll just share some details about what you're seeing. So now we're sharing this very difficult to read file obviously there's a lot going on. So what I did was, if you want to look at your own, or if you, we will, when we release the budget, we will also provide an updated copy of this, for public review. I have taken and removed all of the projects that are complete or nearly complete, because they really don't affect anything anymore other than the money that's already been spent. And that stays in the total. So this is the entire list of projects that have been committed, meaning that we have grant funds and we are committed to actually doing them. We do have pending and proposed projects as well, and that's this list. But none of, I take that back, the Creekside, and now I'm realizing the Creekside and Churchill's Trail study needs to be moved to the committed, because we are committed to that one. I did not move that yet. We'll make sure that is moved before we present this publicly, or present it, for public review. So that will be moved. But these are the pending projects. As you can see, one of them has already moved into the committed column. But I also have I pulled out all of the ones that are completely or mostly completed. And that is this. Now we have this is left for the bond sheet for this year, or for 2024. The top one being one that will need, has not been officially budgeted yet, because we are not sure. We have some grant funding for it, $120,000. But we have to change the scope. So this is work that will have to be done by the engineering committee to figure out what we're going to spend the money that we received for work that was already done on a previous stage of the project. And then we have the pool bathhouse renovation, which, as you see here, we have $80,000 estimated for engineering costs. We have now accepted the construction bid at $651,000. That is including the change orders. And so now we're a little over budget. What we initially, once we had moved everything, we're $51,000 over what we had initially, once we accepted the bid, what we had anticipated from that. And so that total cost is coming out around $788,000. I'm realizing that number. Oh, I realized I added this in here twice. I forgot that I had a change order category. Apologize for that. And so we're looking at a total project cost of around $736,000, and $250,000 of that is offset by grant funds. The rest of which is the borough is paying for. So the borough proposed cost on this project is actually $486,152 coming out of the bond fund. For the stair replacement, at the $600,000 estimated cost, about $106,000 of that will be coming from the borough's proposed bond fund. But we are going to continue to work with the engineering committee to try to get this down to around $500,000, which is right around what we have money for that and these grants can match each other, so we aren't required to put in a match of our own. So we are working on making that happen. The other thing that's budgeted is, and I only have it budgeted right now for engineering costs, and that's the traffic signal, the Steuben and Linden Green Light Go grant that we received. And the reason being is we're still having conversations with the school district around selling that property there at the corner. So we're not sure how that will affect it, but soon into the new year, we should know, or at least by the middle of next year, we should know how that's going to affect it and whether we want to build that street light now or whether we want to wait. Then there's the Linwood Park and Noble lighting project. So this is renovating both of the parks, and we currently have in 2024, I budgeted $455,000. And that is including both engineering and construction costs, because some of this has already been spent. So it's lower than what is on the budget. We have received $250,000 for that project, and we have applied for another $200,000. So we may see a larger offset there. If we don't see that offset, the borough could also choose to just do part of this project. They could do one part or the other. But currently we have it budgeted to do both. And if we do both and we don't receive another grant, it'll cost the borough about $250,000 to do that work. And then the final thing that we have budgeted that is an active project is the big one. That's the Broadhead separation project that we've talked about extensively in council meetings. And that one is budgeted for between engineering costs and the actual construction costs. We're looking at it, and some of this money has already been spent. Much of it engineering costs, or all of it engineering costs, I should say. But we have total budgeted for this project $6,891,000 is the total budget for this. But some of it has already been spent, and we have budgeted for the fiscal year 2024 $4 million, because we are not entirely sure how far it will get into construction. We are still waiting on some easements, so it is prepared for bid, but it has not gone out to bid yet. We have to wait to confirm several easements that we have, so it could be a month or two before we see this go to bid. So that is a summary of the bond fund information. Justin, do you have?
Can we take just 5 seconds to refresh folks on, I think active committed is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Pavement's already hit the road. Engineering's mostly been done. We might already have folks out there doing the work. We may or may not have those grant awards, maybe going after more, et cetera. But can you, like pending and proposed and committed, pending and proposed would just be things that we've kind of thought through and possibly done some estimates, done some engineering estimates, et cetera, right? But there's no grants, there's no consent orders, there's no, like, we're not held on the hook for any of it. But committed, the committed ones that maybe aren't, that we haven't started doing the work on, it's like we have grants for those. We're going to do them and or particularly around like the separation stuff, like we have consent orders that we need to meet. So we have to do them. Like there's no,
correct.
It's not gonna like it has to happen basically.
Yeah. When it happens and how it happens and all of those details are up for conversation. But yes, and to be clear, everything that is on the committed page has received grant awards, has had, as you mentioned, engineering costs already sunk. I wouldn't say that the majority of engineering costs have already been sunk, because really you're only talking about the design phase. You also have several phases after design phase, including inspections and then follow-up. And so lots of work is done after the fact as well. The bulk of it is done prior, but that is to be said. So actually all of these projects on this page have either been completed or are very soon to start. The only one, I'm sorry.
The other thing we might want to point out is that every single one of these projects has been through multiple council phases, approvals, etc. And so there are no new things on here, no surprises.
Yeah. And the only item on this that I mentioned might not happen in 2024, begin in 2024, is the traffic signal, the Green Light Go grant, because we do have time to do that in 2025 if we decide there's a good reason for delaying it. We have had discussions, and it does seem like it probably makes sense to just go ahead and do it. But if we have the time and it's easy to take that time to review it a little closer as we decide what happens with the Linden Avenue property, then we might end up saving money if there's, some kind of that we can do it together with a developer possibly. So those are the committed projects. The pending projects are on this page, and these are projects that have, for the most part, so the grant pending is the first section. Those actually have grants pending. And I do have to update this one as well. I just received notification this week, Monday or Tuesday, that we did not get the grant for 64 South Grandview, the demolition. So that means, and we have several other houses that are in that vein that need to be demoed. So we need to have that's another conversation that needs to happen with the engineering committee to figure out other possible solutions, such as using conservatorship, and or finding money to demo it ourselves through another source, or other opportunities. So we will be looking into that. Oh, my apologies. Yeah, I didn't print. I only printed the front bond page, but I will make sure everybody has this. My apologies. So, and I clearly need to update a couple things. I updated the front page and realized I didn't update this page as well. But so there's two things that need to be removed. The Creekside Churchers Trail needs to be moved to the front page because it is now fully committed. And I have had meetings with DCNR. And then the blight remediation needs to be removed at this point because it is not no longer a pending grant. So that goes over the grant pending issues. The next one is the proposed projects with no apparent grant offsets. And that is DPW phase 3. We have now again, some of these details I've just been getting in the last couple of weeks. So I will actually move this to the front page because we did move that CITF grant that was for a previous phase of the DPW building. And it is in this phase now. So we will move that to that front page. And then the other two, clearly the Belvedere turnaround. I know that was explored at one point, turning the parking lot on Belvedere into a turnaround, but I haven't heard any interest in that since then. Since I started, so I would imagine that would probably drop off unless somebody change it, unless I hear that from somebody else. The last thing was another exploration that was deleted before I got this form, so I'm not sure what that one was. But there are other potentials that we're looking at. We might look at grant opportunities for some facade grants for our buildings and a few other things that we have. And another solution might be to look for a solar grant for the pool house to also replace that in the spring. So those are a couple other options that we have going, but none of those have been applied for yet, and they're not committed. So, are there any questions about the what we've budgeted for 2024 for the bond funds?
Parks Master Site Plan
Yes.
is still on here, and that is, well past complete. It just says that we haven't received an invoice yet. Is there any reason why why it's delayed so long?
I had no idea. And I just realized this week that we hadn't received any bill from them in quite some time. And so I'm going to be reaching out to them. I have no idea why they have not invoiced us the last piece of it. So
I would also just flag this for us because it has been a little while, and maybe I'm forgetting, so we might need to go back, but we were waiting on the approval of that from the state, and I don't recall ever hearing back about that.
oh, we received it within a month after I started. So we got that. I think I announced it in a meeting. I think it was in February or March that we received that approval. Yep. And I have moved that on this bigger sheet. I did move, like, for the one that's completed. I moved that to the completed or mostly completed page, but on the page I gave you has everything.
I guess the only comment I have about this is just kind of like looking at the front page here and the numbers at the bottom a little bit. If you would just want to scroll down to those summary numbers, and I don't know if zooming in might make it a little bit better for folks to see on the Zoom and or the recording. I mean, I think these numbers are probably a pretty good overview if you want to skip past some of the nitty gritty details of kind of like what's going on. And, if you look at how much bond fund we're going to have after all of the commitments, right? It's going to be like 2.4 million left. And then everything in the red is pending, right? So there's flexibility there. Future councils will have an opportunity to influence that 2.4 million.
Right,
Which is
but
good.
We
So,
should also state that there are some time constraints
Yeah.
on getting most of this in the ground because of the bond timing requirements. So,
We're actually, I think we need to get to about 80% spend on this, and we will have surpassed that by the end of the year next year. So,
Okay.
which is when we need to do that by.
right,
So
so
we're
that we
actually-
can husband the remaining.
Yeah. So
A
the
little longer.
remaining, because the remaining is just about 20%. Because it's actually $78,000 lower than this because, well, actually $40,000 lower because the moving that trail study over would take a little bit off this total. But yeah, we're well where we need to be as far as spending the money. So
yeah, I guess the other piece here is that if we're looking at some of the higher numbers up here, we have costs still expected from committed projects. We have about $8.5 million in costs still in flight.
Mhm.
And just kind of given the conditions of everything, I guess I wouldn't be surprised next year to hear that like this or that went up a little bit here or there. So just kind of looking down at the bottom, if the trigger was pulled on all proposed projects, we'd only have $900,000 of wiggle room. Doesn't seem like a whole lot of wiggle room for $8.5 million in flight. So I guess just probably a note for not future me, future whoever's sitting in this seat.
yeah.
Be wary of committing all of this too quickly, just so that we have wiggle room.
Yeah, and we now have the engineer Larry is updating this monthly with new figures directly with what we've actually received and what we've paid. So that we know exactly where we're at every moment. Although, as you've seen in the last month with the 3 projects that are ongoing, the stairs, the public works, and the pool house, things, like you said, they change quickly when they, especially when projects get started. So.
We want to move on to the
Yep.
budget.
Okay, so as we mentioned that this is, the recap of all the details that you just saw on the bond fund. So now I'm going to move on to the next one that we started to dig into last time. I clarified it a little bit so it's less confusing. But I also have the projects themselves on the next page so that we can dig into this. We do have currently in the draft budget, we have $500,000 budgeted for deferred maintenance out of the total sewer budget of close to $3 million. And you can see in that first section, the total old repairs amount for $645,000. So even with that $500,000 that increased budget, we're still not going to get through all the old repairs in the new year, but that's the goal. Larry and I will be meeting to look at these more closely to see, which ones we should address first. When we started this project process with Gateway, we actually removed several that had already been done that they hadn't already pulled from their list. And so now we're down to these 3 pages of projects, which I will review in a little more detail so you can get an idea of where they're at. But addressing the first one. So these are all the oldest repairs. These are the ones you can see the CT in the second column there. You see the CTTV year. These were done in 2017, 21, 19. Some were even done as far back as 2016. So these are repairs. The first set of repairs are the ones that are manhole to manhole liners. These are the most significant, typically from a cost perspective, because you're basically creating an entirely new pipe in that length of 200, whether it's 275 feet, 315 feet. And in the case of the second one down, we have to also add a manhole to that segment because of the due to the segment length. But these are the ones that really need to be done before they collapse, because once projects like this collapse, they become much more expensive. That next section down are projects that are typically shorter in length. They're just small repairs, but they do need to be dug out. And that is what you see there. That's why you see these lengths are much shorter. They're 15 feet, 27 feet, and most of them are 6 or 10 feet. Those are just small repairs, but because they require excavation, they are significantly more expensive than just doing a spot liner or doing a manhole to manhole across a whole section. And then the last section on this page is the old repairs, the spot liner repairs. There are 45 of these on the list. And these are generally, I don't know if Michael, if you want to, Michael Haberman is here with us today from Gateway. If you want to describe, I don't know if how familiar you are with. Okay, with spot liners, then I won't put you on the spot. Okay. Okay. He's a traffic engineer, so not his forte tonight. But those are the smaller spot liners. And I've had them described exactly how they work, but I don't want to repeat it and embarrass myself if I'm wrong. So, but those are the overall repair. Those are the old repairs that need to be done. Any questions on this before I move to the newer repairs? Nope. Okay. And so these are the ones that have been done through the last 2 years of CCTV work, 2021 and 2022. As you can see, the costs on these are much lower. The volume of these are much lower because we're getting these as they're happening, as we do. Every year we film 10% of the borough's pipes. So we CCTV 10% of the pipes so that we always are keeping up on what's happening throughout the borough. These and we have not determined which of these could wait and which of them are more emergency, but we will be doing that in the near future. But these are the ones that we have $76,000 and $77,000 in manhole to manhole liners that need to be done. And then we have a few digs that need to happen on Linshaw Avenue. Or I guess that's we would know that as is it Linwood? No. Yeah, Linwood Avenue. Now what is that? Doesn't sound right. I always get these confused.
South and North Linwood.
What's the one by the Linden? Sorry, Linden. I
Oh.
was blank. I always get Linden and Linwood confused. So yeah.
Yeah, when Linden crosses the Ingram border, it turns
Right.
into Linshaw.
So yeah, technically these are actually on Linden Avenue, but so we're aware of that. All right. Any questions on these? And then the last page is all repairs related to Duncan, because there was a significant amount of work that has been needed down there, and there's been a significant amount of investigation done because of getting to the point where trying to find how we can separate our sewer. You heard Councilman Marks talking about the need to follow our consent decree, and a big part of our consent decree is sewer separation, because we are a combined sewer system, and we need to get it down to that we only put 15% of our capacity in the combined system, or 15% goes into the stream in a given year.
Right, 15%
And it
of
overflows.
sewage that comes from the combined system.
Yeah.
Because the separated
Right.
stuff goes in.
Right.
But it doesn't have sewage in it.
Yep. And there's no real simple way to describe that, because it's a modeling how they find that. So it's pretty complicated. They basically use a 1-inch rainfall. They have a whole set of parameters that they have to test against, and that's how they determine whether you're at 15%. So it's a fairly complicated system, but it's how the EPA has decided to do it, measure it. Any questions on that series of repairs? Okay.
So then the summary is that our sewer fund is in good shape.
Yep.
That the proposal for this budget is that we're going to pull an extra 500 out of it to start attacking these old repairs before we end up with what we just had happen
Mhm.
from the one that collapsed.
Correct.
And that the sewer fund, even with that, is in good shape.
Correct. And to one, I do want to correct one thing. That is, we're not pulling an additional 500,000. We typically had in the past been budgeting 400,000 a year for this. So all we are actually pulling into this budget is an additional $100,000 for this year, because it seems like we're going to catch up fairly quickly if we keep at that rate for a couple of years.
Okay, thanks for that correction.
Yep. All right. Well, with that, those are that is, the more detailed version of that. Other than that, we all have the budget in front of us. If any, the council will take that home and review it. And if they have any questions, please let me know what those might be. We are going to update the notes on this, and this will be provided as for when we advertise. This is, you see it separated by general fund and by each of the areas that it affects. So the first pages are the general fund admin. And then once we get admin, includes basically what happens in the office, most of the funding that can't fall into under basically it's the catch-all for lots of the other sections of the budget. Then we have a section for code enforcement, and that shows what we bring in for code enforcement and what is spent on code enforcement. And we have a page for community activities, also bringing in what we bring in for community activities from, for example, the pool shelter rentals and community room fees or senior dinners. That's all brought in there. And then the budget for those events. And then we have the fire protection fund, which shows some of the money that we received from the foreign fire fund and intergovernmental contracts, and then what we pay both to the fire department or for the fire department on that page. These are all still in the general fund, and then the general fund also has a division for the libraries, what we donate to the library on an annual basis. The municipal properties list is basically just expenses and what we provide in that sense, although we could move the rental fees that we receive from the magistrate building and the library onto this page, but that had not been done previously. The police fund is there as well, with all the incomes that we receive from crossing guard reimbursements, police application fees, departmental earnings and whatnot, and then licenses and permits that they provide. Yep, and then the cost that the payment we receive from Thornburg on an annual basis, which this was discussed, I think, briefly last time, and I just want to update everybody on this. And we did, I was not aware that we actually have an active contract with Thornburg, so it is not a annual renewal. It is right now we're on a 4-year contract. And it is going up in 2024 by 3%.
And that's that last year on that contract.
And that is the final year of that contract.
It's an option year. It's a 3-year contract with 1-year option.
Oh,
And the first 3 years are flat at the 101. And then the 4th year is a 3% increase.
Yep.
So we had talked about that before and doing per capita and all of those things. But that's the contract. So
Right, so that's what it'll be in 2024, and then shortly after the first of the year, both mayors and our manager will be starting to look at some of those suggestions that have been made by council to prepare for what 2025 and beyond will provide. So the other thing is we're going through this budget and we've printed this out again for council. You and I spoke earlier today that it is significantly the same as the one when we started this process in September. There were only 2 or 3 things that you were gonna highlight.
Yeah, and I highlighted those at the beginning, right?
Okay, super. Well,
Yep.
that's what I
Right
get for
before you
being
s-
5 minutes late.
Yeah, that's all right. Right before you snuck in, I got those few things added, so. Yep. And I think I did find one other one that we hadn't mentioned in our discussion, so that was added as well.
Then, as you mentioned, we were reviewing the updated budget to actual and realizing that a lot of the notes that are actually on there really apply to what we're doing with the budget. So that was the conversation where a number of those will be reworded and put in the note column here, so that when you see variances, and particularly where a budget may have been lowered for revenue, there will be an explanation about why that's been lowered. And then the same thing for any significant changes from the 2023 budget to what we're proposing for expenses. So those will be noted, and they will be noted with how much the change is and what the reasoning is.
Yep.
So I think another thing to notice is a couple things, I guess. First is the budget that's listed on this sheet is showing January through July. Or I'm sorry, the actuals for January through July, they're
Yep.
not through September. So they are through half of the year. The other thing is this would be a balanced budget as it is here, with breaking even as a 0.
Yep. Yep.
With everything included that we've talked about. And obviously going through all the line items, we do have another meeting on November 30th. So it's going to be important to come with questions,
Oh.
comments, anything else, and feel free to ask them in between that time to our borough manager to get clarity.
Yeah, by all means, please come meet with me if you want to sit down and talk about it for an hour. I'm happy to do that, or for longer, or for less time, depending on what you need.
And the other thing to stress is the timing. Will, in our regular meeting, will be putting up a motion to advertise, which we have certain requirements and timing to
said
do that and all of that.
Yeah, he mentioned that before.
Oh, you did a lot
Yeah.
in 5 minutes.
I don't have time to mess around.
All right. I'm not gonna waste any more of our time.
All right.
That's to say, none of us want to be here right before Christmas.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now,
Yeah.
do we also, for the items that were the questions from last time, because I know there were some additional ones for this meeting.
Mhm.
What about the items from last time that were still questions? Were they put in the budget? I think it was the $200,000 truck, the library awnings, or the magistrate library awnings.
Yeah,
items.
no, did note where those have changed. We did not put the awnings in. We made the decision,
The
we had a,
recommendation,
yeah, what's that?
the recommendation.
Yeah, the recommendation. I shouldn't say we made the decision, but we thought that we would actually, with this, facade grants are actually fairly common.
Yeah.
So we're gonna look into grants first. And if we can't get grants, then we might consider that. We'll probably consider it in the following year budget. And then there were some other options. The $200,000, we haven't, that was for a public works request for and now it's
Is it the
Some
skid
vehicle.
thing?
it's not the skid steer, it's
It's
the front loader. Sorry, thank you.
Big-
Couldn't think of what it was called. The front loader, and we haven't had further conversations yet with Carnegie, so that is probably something that's going to be pushed a little down the road. I don't think anybody was expecting it to happen, so it's not a need. It's a want that could save time and make a few jobs easier. So it really we have to determine whether that's actually worth it. And whether any agreement or conversation or that we have with Carnegie that would also be worth it. So there's more work to be done to make that happen.
And from a public's perspective, in terms of them looking at their taxes, there's no real estate tax increase associated with this. Is there a road fund increase and a sewer fund, and then the garbage, which we kind of know that.
Yeah, there is going to be a garbage increase that is contractual. We have no choice in the matter. And the same thing with the sewer fund. There is going to be a sewer increase. We did receive notification from Alcoasand that they will be raising their prices again, which has been expected and is expected for a while, for some time now. So we did have increases on both of those. We did not have a road tax increase though,
Right.
nor a real estate tax increase.
And this is a time during inflation at being 8% last year and significant this year. So that's something to recognize as we continue to watch these finances.
All right, I guess we have a 4-minute break before we start the official meeting. Council meeting.
That's good.
All right.
Thank you.